Hi all, welcome to Diversified Finance. Just today we're gonna have a look at the current housing market. As you know, on Tuesday, Reserve Bank of Australia increased the interest rate to like 4.35. So for borrowers, right, people who borrowed money, who bought a property last year or a few like years ago, who are on a variable interest rate, this is not something good because the repayment's gonna go higher. It's gonna get the repayment's gonna get bigger, and then it'll be harder for you to service your mortgage. Depending on how much you borrow, right? You borrowed like way too much, it's gonna be really, really harder for you to like service your mortgage. So, um, just gonna go through few things, and I'm gonna get to there's a budget. They're gonna reveal the May. They're gonna reveal the May budget on Tuesday and next week. So I'm gonna discuss about that as well. What sort of changes are coming to the property market? And just before that, like let's go into like a small scenario here where you can say, for example, let's go to the next slide. So this is like the household income, right? So combining income, wife and husband, 200,000 K household, right? So in New South Wales, this is like the top 10 to 15. Like, this could be the same in all over Australia, or like it'll be the same for the whole country, but I've just taken only New South Wales. So if your household income is 200K, you are probably in top 10 to 15 percentage, right? They call it like upper middle income. And if you're earning 350K or over, you're probably in the top 3 to 5%. It's a top tier income, right? So if if you consider a household that makes 200,000 a year, can borrow up to 1 million to 1.25, right? So let's not forget, it's only 10 to 15% who could afford to buy a house in this range, 1 to 1.2 million or 25 million. If you're earning 350 if your household income is 350,000 or more, you can borrow up to 2 million, 1.62 million, right? And if you go to the next slide, uh, this is typical purchase for a 200K household, like, a household that making 200K per year is a 1.2 to 1.5. For 350K household, it's like 2 million to 2.5, right? So, and also, that's just that. And then let's also look at this one right here. So in New South Wales, as you can see here, if you take all the household that who are making 200,000 a year, uh, only 8 to 15% actively looking to buy, right? So it's about 224,000 to 75,000 household, right? And if you think about 350K and above, who's making 350K per year or above, uh, in that category, there's only 12 to 25% actually looking to buy, right? So, um, so as you can see, like now, here's my question for you, right? Let's say you bought a property like for $1 million, $1 million, and your expectation is like in 5 years to sell it for 1.5 million, right? But let's not forget, like a lot of things can change in 5 years. But looking at this scenario, right? If you want to make 500,000 in 5 years, let's say you just paid cash, right? Like you're not going to borrow money or anything. I paid cash, and you want to sell it like for 1.5 million dollars and make 500,000 out of this property. But imagine how uh, who could actually afford to buy this property, right? 1.5 million, to borrow 1.5 million from a bank, right? You need to have your combined household income should be 300, probably 300,000 and over. So I'm just putting out these numbers just to get an idea, like, so you can understand what I'm saying. So it's not realistic, like for someone to buy like a property for 1 million and expect it to sell like in 1 point for 1.5 in 5 years, because there'll be higher you trying to sell, there'll be less people who can afford to borrow money from the bank and service that sort of a loan, right? So this is the problem. So I'm trying, I kept on saying this, like, over the years, this borrowing money, and then apart from that, nobody's going to pay cash. Like, most of us wouldn't probably be um, buying house like outright. Like, you borrow money and then you have to service your mortgage, and when you service your mortgage for the first 3 years, you pay interest of the most of the 30-year loan. In first 3 years, the bank takes out all the interest. So that's like a expense for you, right? So when you deduct all that, right, at the end of the day, like, even after 5 years, you barely making any money. Let's say you make like 200,000 profit, like after everything you have done, like, let's say you repaired something in the house, let's say you done some of that, you probably be end up making like 200,000 probably in 10 years, right? And then divided that by 10, that's like 20 grand. You just made like 20 grand a year. But like when you sit down with your friends, like people would say, okay, I bought a property for 1 million and then I sold it for like 1.5. And people think, oh wow, you just made like 500,000. Not really, right? You have to deduct all the repayments, the interest repayment, interest that you paid, to deduct all the expenses that cost, like, for example, stamp duty, things like that. You have to deduct that, and when you buy, there's cost involved. When you sell, there's cost involved. You have to pay some amount of money for the agent. You have to deduct that, lawyer fees, conveyor fees. When you deduct all that, at the end of the day, you did not make 500,000. You probably make far less than that. But it the thing is, it impress you, like, for you to sit down and tell someone, oh, I just made like 500,000, but that's not the truth. But understand, like, unless you buying a property outright, like, unless you're paying cash, if you borrow money, there are other costs involved. And now, uh, it's a bad news for the property investors, because interest rate has gone up, right? People couldn't afford to pay service their mortgage. So when that happens, what would people do? They probably, if someone has five, six properties, like, they probably want to offload maybe two, three of it, like, because they are making it harder and harder and putting more taxes on people. Like, look at what's going on in Melbourne, right? Look at what happened in Toronto, like Canada. Their housing market is 30% down. Look what has happened in Auckland. Their housing market is 30% down. And see, you already know what is going on in Melbourne. The median house price in Melbourne has dropped to like 800,000. And then when they look at the numbers, they realize there's internal migration, meaning people, I mentioned this in my previous video, people moved out from Melbourne to other states looking for a better deal, right? And imagine when Melbourne median house price drops to like 600 to 700,000. Then for someone who lives in Sydney, they can sell their their apartment and then probably buy a house in Melbourne. So people might move from Sydney to Melbourne. This could happen. So if you had the idea that housing market has to keep on going higher, that's not going to happen. And then the worst thing is, uh, there's like rumors, right? Though they're talking about it right now. On Tuesday, uh, May budget, seems like they're gonna scrap negative gearing. And maybe they're gonna will be grandfathered. Maybe if you bought a property beforehand, that's not gonna be your okay for now, right? It's not gonna be changed. But if you from probably 1st of July, if you buy a property, you cannot negatively gear that. And then something like that. And then I heard something like that. So this we have to wait and see. I'm just speculating at the moment, so it's hypothetical. And also they're going to limit uh, two investment properties per investor. So that's the maximum you can buy. You cannot buy more than two investment properties, right? So as you can see, like, the government is trying to find a solution, because this has been like a huge issue for most of us, right? Like, if you're renting, yeah, your rent is so high. And government can also do better, like, but not letting so many people coming into the country, but they are not talking about that. Like, they always talk about supply, then what about the demand, right? They also say, oh, there's not enough supply, not enough supply. So what about the demand? Yeah, also think about the demand as well. So if they're not gonna let so many people into the country, right? Then there'll be less people. Like, doesn't matter, like, let's say you come from, like, even if you're a student, right, you need a place to live, so you need a place to rent, right? So that's going to create demand, but they're not talking about, they're letting so many people, right? I'm not saying, I mean, I'm an immigrant myself, right? I just came to Australia in 2003. So I'm not saying don't let anyone come in. I said let people come in and make sure uh, people who live here, it's not going to be an issue for the people who live here, right? And then look at the infrastructure, and then look at these roads. Like, if you trying to drive like to city, if you want to drive to city from say Parramatta or Blacktown or Broken Mills or Pennant Hills, it takes probably like 2 hours for you to get to city because of the traffic. So, and if you let more people come in, it's going to get worse. Like, there's no point like adding more lanes, right, and making the road wider, or like, have like more lanes on the highway, when you have so many people coming into country. Like, it needs to be controlled to a certain extent. That's what I'm saying. So next Tuesday, I'm waiting. So it looks like they changes for CGT. Uh, it's gonna go down from, probably, I'm not too sure. I'm just this hypothetical. I heard news like that they're gonna reduce it to 33% from 50%. So back in the day, if you made this is only for property, they say, not for other assets. So if you make like 1 million profit out of a property, you need to pay only 500,000 uh, will be taxed, right? But in the future, it'll be more, maybe 750 to 700,000 will be taxed from that profit. So a lot of changes are coming. So housing market, things are not looking good. Unfortunately, it's not looking good. Like, I mean, uh, what we need to understand, like, if you're planning to buy right now, my advice is wait. We probably be able to buy uh, a, a house like lot cheaper in January, February, or maybe in 2027 Jan, or maybe towards Q3 in 2027. Things will be a lot cheaper. Yeah, so for property investors, there's not a um, good news. So a lot of changes happening on CGT will be changed. Negative gearing will be scrapped for new home buyers. You can only have two innocent properties per investor. Okay, that's just a quick update in regards to property market. I'll talk to you in the next video. See ya.